The Upper Peninsula hides a stretch of land the locals won't touch. Frost Pine Ridge. They say the ridge breathes when the storms roll in, that if you listen close enough, you can feel the air move around you, like lungs under the snow. This account was recovered from a wildlife surveyor's log in Iron County. It was supposed to be a simple camera retrieval. What he found instead was something that watched him back. Tonight we return to the white silence of Frost Pine Ridge and face what the locals call the Abomazoo. Abomazoo, the hum beneath Frost Pine Ridge. The wind had a way of making the trees sound alive up here. It wasn't a whistle or a howl. It was a long, aching groan that moved through the timber like something searching for a way out. Frost Pine Ridge stretched out around me in every direction, a pale wilderness of half-buried pines and jagged ridgelines buried under 6 feet of snow. The last ranger station sat 12 miles behind me, swallowed by the storm wall I'd ridden through that morning. My snowmobile idled low, its engine echoing off the frozen slope. The GPS was already useless. Signal lost the moment I crossed Dead Elk Creek, but I knew the trail by memory. I'd been up here a dozen times over the past winter, tracking wolves and black bear migrations, collecting motion camera data for a state wildlife study. Nothing ever made me uneasy until this week. 2 nights ago, my southernmost camera had sent its last image, a blurred white shape half hidden by a spruce trunk. Then silence. No uploads, no motion triggers. It wasn't unusual for batteries to die early in sub-zero temps, but the timing, right before the storm, set my nerves on edge. I parked at the old snow fence, grabbed my pack, and began the uphill climb on foot. The snow came up past my knees, heavy and slow. Every step made a deep crunch, then silence so complete it rang in my ears. My breath froze on the inside of my mask. Up close, the ridge was a maze of ice-choked gullies and fallen pines. The last of the sun was already bleeding out behind the clouds. I passed an old wooden sign nailed to a tree, letters carved by hand decades ago. Brimley Ridge, keep clear. Below it, someone had drawn a spiral symbol in charcoal. Locals called it the Turn. Said it marked places where the snow didn't melt right, even in April. I never took much stock in backwoods superstition. Until this winter, the locals had just been stories around a bar. Half a mile up, I found the first camera, or what was left of it. The metal casing was crushed flat, lens shattered, strap torn clean off the trunk. The bark underneath was scored with parallel claw marks, deep enough to expose raw wood beneath. I crouched, gloved fingers tracing the grooves. They were too wide for any black bear, too deep for a wolf. Whatever made them had hands, or something close. The snow around the base of the tree was disturbed, but not the way you'd expect from a 4-legged animal. I saw imprints, 2 massive shapes, human-like, each spaced 6 feet apart. The snow beneath was packed solid, as if something heavy had stood there for a long time. Then I noticed the hair. A single strand frozen into the bark, coarse as wire, pale gray-white. It shimmered slightly when I held my flashlight over it. I sealed it in a sample bag, half because protocol said to, and half because I didn't want to leave it behind. The wind shifted. It wasn't loud, more like a breath against my ear, the kind you feel more than hear. I turned, scanning the tree line. The snow fell thicker now, blurring the ridge into pale silhouettes. Something moved between them, a flicker of motion, too smooth to be branches. I lifted the flashlight again. Nothing. Only the slow fall of snow and that faint moan threading through the forest like a voice calling from under ice. I pressed on, following my map toward the second camera site by the creek. Each step made the world smaller, the ridge closing in, the light fading fast. My headlamp barely cut 20 feet through the haze. Frost hung off every pine needle, glittering like broken glass. Down by the creek, I found a trail of blood in the snow. It started as drops, then streaks, then a drag mark disappearing into a hollow between two boulders. I followed it a few yards until the smell hit me. Iron, rot, and something chemical. A dead elk lay half buried under a drift, its hindquarters shredded clean to bone. But the strangest part wasn't the kill. It was the lack of prints around it. No predator signs, no tracks of any kind. The snow all around the carcass was smooth, untouched, like something had dropped from above. The radio on my vest hissed, then crackled. For a split second, I thought I heard a voice, then just static. I toggled the channel, but the signal was dead. That's when I saw the second camera. It was wedged in the crook of a birch limb about 12 feet up, just like I left it. But the lens faced the wrong direction, twisted toward the woods behind it. I climbed up and pried it free. The strap was intact, but the mount screw had been unscrewed by hand. Something had turned it. Snow began to fall harder, cutting visibility to almost nothing. I packed the camera, pulled my hood up, and looked one last time toward the tree line. The ridge loomed black behind the snowfall, tall and jagged. Somewhere in that white curtain came a sound so low it felt more than heard. A slow, vibrating groan that rolled through the ground itself. It wasn't thunder, it wasn't wind, it was breath, and it came from deep within Frost Pine Ridge. By the time I reached the edge of Brimley Valley, night had swallowed the ridge completely. The blizzard thickened until the world became a tunnel of white and shadow. My headlamp's beam vanished into it, eaten by the snow. Every direction looked the same. Black trees, white drifts, wind that screamed through the pines like something angry to be alive. I spotted the sawmill's roofline when the snow thinned for half a breath, a collapsed shape against the slope, timber ribs jutting from the ice like bones. The old Brimley sawmill. The place had been shut down since the 50s, abandoned when the company went bankrupt after a string of accidents. Some said workers went missing during a bad winter, bodies never found. I'd seen the records back at the station, just names and red X's. But stories stuck to this place like frost. Hunters said lights moved through the trees at night, that the ridge hummed during snowstorms, and sometimes, if you stopped breathing long enough, the woods breathed back. The wind died the second I stepped inside. The sawmill's main hall was a cavern of frozen metal. Rusted saw blades hung from ceiling hooks, each rimmed with ice like teeth. The smell was old oil, dust, and something sharp beneath it, like ozone after lightning. My flashlight beam caught rows of workbenches, stacks of warped planks, and a cracked office door hanging crooked on its hinges. Snow hissed through holes in the roof. Somewhere, water dripped steadily into a frozen bucket. I set my pack down near an old boiler, brushed the frost from a half-buried desk, and took stock. One working flashlight, 2 camera units, and my emergency thermos already half-frozen solid. The small radio still showed no signal. I pulled my notebook and marked the coordinates, out of habit if nothing else. The pencil tip broke. When I reached to sharpen it, I noticed footprints in the dust by the far wall. They weren't mine. Large, bare impressions, 5 toes each, wide as my hand, pressed deep into the old sawdust floor. They came from the doorway, crossed the hall, and vanished beneath a stairwell leading to the upper loft. Each print had a thin crust of frost inside it, as if the air itself froze around wherever it stepped. I aimed my flashlight toward the stairs. The upper floor was a tangle of broken rafters and conveyor belts. For a long minute I listened. Nothing moved, but the air felt thicker, heavier somehow, like a storm building behind the walls. In one corner of the main floor stood an old locker cabinet half open, Inside hung the tattered remains of a ranger parka. The patch was barely legible, but I recognized the name, W. Mercer. He'd vanished 2 winters ago. A logbook lay beside it on a workbench, frozen stiff but readable. The last entry was short, written in a shaky hand. Something's up there, watching from the ridge when the wind's high. White, but not snow, not bear, not man. The breath steams before it shows itself. I'm leaving before it gets dark again. I don't know why, but I read that last line twice. The roof groaned overhead, snow sliding down in sheets. I jumped at the sound of something tapping metal. A faint ping. Ping. Ping, like nails falling from height. I aimed the light upward. A section of the upper catwalk sagged under a crust of ice. Then the tapping stopped. Something shuffled. The beam caught motion. Just a flicker. Something pale slipping out of sight behind the railing. My chest tightened. I froze, waiting, listening. The silence stretched long enough that I started to doubt myself. Started to think it was just ice breaking loose. Then came the sound again. Soft, deliberate. Creak. Step. Creak. Something was walking across the catwalk. I killed my light. Darkness swallowed the room. The only sound was the slow tick of dripping water and that muffled tread above me. The boards flexed. I could hear it pause, like it was listening back. I held my breath, then a single heavy thud shook the loft, followed by a scrape that traveled across the ceiling and down the far wall. Dust fell like ash. The scrape became a dragging noise, slow and circular, tracing the outer edge of the mill. It was outside now. The generator in the corner flickered to life on its own, a leftover safety circuit kicking power through the old lines. Weak yellow bulbs sputtered awake one by one, buzzing overhead. And in the flash between dark and light, I saw it. A face in the window. Pale, gray-blue, eyes like empty wells. Steam drifted from its nostrils, clouding the glass. The shape vanished before I could even raise my camera. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my pack. The lights went out again. When the hum of the generator died, the silence returned. But not the same silence as before. This one listened. I huddled near the boiler and built a small fire using splinters from a busted crate. The flame felt like a sin in that darkness. My hands shook so bad, the lighter almost slipped. Outside, something knocked once on the wall. A deep, hollow sound that rattled the sheet metal. Then again. Knock. 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 The knocks weren't random. They were spaced apart, deliberate, almost testing the structure. I smothered the flame, crouched low, and waited. Snow whispered through the holes in the roof. For a heartbeat, the world held still. Then a long, dragging sound crawled up the outside wall, across the roof, and stopped directly above me. I could hear it breathing, slow, wet, mechanical. Each exhale rolled dust off the rafters, then silence again. My flashlight refused to turn on. Dead batteries. Both spares. Dead too. Static crackled in the radio. A burst like whispering right against my ear, then gone. I sat there in the dark until my knees went numb, staring into nothing, trying not to breathe too loud. When dawn finally began to gray the windows, I packed up what little I had left and stepped outside. The storm had passed, leaving a world of white silence. The roof above the sawmill was caved in. Long claw gouges scored the tin sheets, curling strips of metal back like peeled skin. In the snow below, I saw tracks leading away from the building, each print 3 times the size of a man's foot, pressed deep into the frozen crust, heading downhill toward the creek. And at the edge of the first print lay something half buried in ice, a torn strip of orange fabric from a ranger jacket. I knew whose jacket it was. Mercer hadn't left, after all. The world after dawn looked dead. Not peaceful, just drained. The snow had stopped falling, but fog hung low over Frost Pine Ridge, thick as smoke. Every breath felt like it scraped ice along the inside of my chest. The prints from the sawmill led straight downhill toward the creek. I followed, not out of bravery, but because the idea of staying still felt worse. The tracks were massive. Each impression cratered the crusted snow as if whatever made them weighed several hundred pounds. The stride was long and measured, not a stumble or drag in sight. It moved with purpose. Half a mile down, the terrain shifted to a narrow valley where a frozen stream ran between black spruce. The silence there was unnatural, dense enough that I could hear the small crackle of frost shifting under the surface ice. I stopped beside a tree scarred by deep gouges. The sap had frozen mid-drip, long amber icicles dangling like claws. I found blood, faint and dark, scattered in drops across the snow. At first, I thought it was from the elk carcass upstream, but then I saw it trailed with the prints, not away from them. Something was wounded, or something else had been dragged. I pulled out the camera I'd recovered earlier, hoping maybe its local storage still held something. When I powered it on, the screen glitched white for a moment before displaying the last clip. A few seconds of static, then a blurred image of trees shaking violently. Then the camera toppled, and just before the feed cut out, a shape passed in front of it. White fur, human shoulders, a face that wasn't human, then black. I shoved the camera into my pack and pushed forward. The trail curved around the bend toward the frozen creek bed. That's when I saw the first sign of man again. A snowmobile half buried in a drift, windshield shattered, its tracks half filled with snow. I approached cautiously. The paint was Ranger issue orange, same as Mercer's jacket. There were marks all around it. Something had circled the wreck, deep gouges where claws had punched through the snowmobile's side panel. The engine compartment was open, wires torn out like veins. I leaned closer, and the smell hit me. Faint rot mixed with cold iron and something chemical, like antifreeze and blood. Movement in the corner of my eye made me turn. Across the creek stood a shape, tall, still, pale. It wasn't hiding. It didn't need to. It stood like the ridge itself had grown eyes. The Abomazoo. Even at that distance, I could see steam rise off its body where sunlight touched it. Its fur wasn't clean white, but streaked with dirt and ash gray. The head was wrong, too round, almost swollen, the skin beneath its eyes blackened like frostbite. It tilted its head once, slow, deliberate, studying me the way a man might study an animal that's wandered too close. Then it moved. Not a sprint, not yet. It slid down the bank in long strides that barely disturbed the snow, like the weight didn't matter. I turned and ran. The snowmobile roared after 2 tries, engine coughing, tread spinning for traction. When it caught, I gunned it toward the tree line, tearing through drifts so thick they felt like walls. My visor fogged instantly. I glanced back once, mist, trees, nothing. But it was there. I could feel it. The ridge seemed to hum again, a low vibration that made the air itself heavy. The path narrowed into an old logging trail littered with fallen branches. The machine bounced hard enough to bruise my ribs. Somewhere behind me came a sound like a chain snapping. A blur of white crossed the edge of my vision. Then, impact! Something slammed the snowmobile from the side, flipping it into a bank. I hit the ground, shoulder first, slid several feet, and stopped against a tree. The world spun. My legs screamed when I tried to stand, twisted. maybe worse. The snowmobile lay upside down, track still spinning. Silence again. No engine, no breath, no wind. Just the sound of snow settling. Then, a crunch. Slow, deliberate steps approached through the fog. I pressed my back against the tree, knife drawn, breath shaking. The steps paused just outside the haze. For a long moment, nothing. Then the fog shifted, and I saw a shape, bent, enormous, arms nearly dragging the ground. Its chest rose and fell, each breath visible in the cold air. When it exhaled, frost fell from its fur like dust. It turned its head slightly, and that's when I saw its face clear for the first time. The eyes were sunken pits, the skin around them translucent, veins spiderwebbed blue. Its mouth hung slightly open, teeth jagged and uneven, glistening like frozen glass. There was no animal sense in its gaze, only something ancient and tired, like it had been alive far too long. It stepped forward and sniffed the air, nostrils flaring. Steam curled from them. I didn't move. A branch cracked somewhere behind us. The thing turned toward the sound, every muscle shifting beneath that frozen hide. Its neck made a dry, snapping sound as it moved. I used the distraction to crawl toward the fallen snowmobile. The gas tank was leaking. I tore my lighter from my pocket and flicked it once, twice, until the spark caught the vapor. Flame burst through the snow, low and blue. The Abomazoo turned back, saw the light, and let out a sound that didn't belong to anything natural. Half roar, half exhale. The noise of air forced through lungs full of ice. I rolled aside as the snowmobile went up. The blast wasn't huge, but it sent shards of metal and fire across the clearing. I felt heat on my face, smelled burning plastic, and underneath it, that other smell again. Burning hair and meat. When the smoke thinned, the clearing was empty. Only footprints remained, deep and heading toward the ridge again. I should have gone the other way. Downhill, toward the lake. But my mind wasn't working logically anymore. I wanted proof. Maybe the camera in my pack still held data. Maybe I thought I could end it. I followed the tracks, limping, the ridge rising around me like a frozen amphitheater. The air grew colder, heavier. The trees here were dead, no bark, no color, just ice-wrapped skeletons stretching up into fog. I realized with a sick clarity that every one of them leaned inward toward the center, toward something. I reached the clearing at the heart of Frost Pine Ridge, just as the sky began to darken again. The tracks stopped abruptly. In the center stood a hole in the ground, perfectly circular, rimmed with ice like glass. Steam rose from it. Inside, something glowed faintly blue, pulsing slow and rhythmic. The heat coming off it melted the snow around the edges. I leaned closer, light trembling in my hand. Beneath the layer of ice was a cavity, smooth, deep, filled with bones. Elk, wolves, human. Dozens of them, all fused together by the frost. And in the center, something else. Something that looked like a spine, but too large, too long, coiled like a serpent. The hum started again. It came from below. The ground trembled softly, as though the ridge itself inhaled. And then a shape rose from the fog on the far side of the pit, taller than before, shoulders steaming. The Abomazoo had been circling me. It stepped into view, light glinting off frozen patches of skin. And I understood now what the hum was. It wasn't the wind, it was its breathing. The sound of lungs so massive they made the ground vibrate. It took one step forward, and I finally ran. Branches tore at my jacket, snow blind in every direction. The ridge moaned behind me, echoing that impossible breathing. I saw the faint shape of a tower, light in the distance, the old ranger lookout. I made for it, half running, half crawling. The sound followed me all the way. Never closer, never farther. just constant. A breath that would never stop. The tower looked closer than it was. It took me nearly an hour to reach it, limping through waist-high drifts, while the fog thickened behind me like smoke after a blast. Every few seconds, the ridge exhaled, a slow, hollow pressure that pushed against my ribs. The Abomazoo wasn't chasing, it was hurting. When I finally stumbled into the clearing, the ranger tower rose above me like a skeleton of iron and wood. The ladder rungs were coated in rime. Each step screeched under my boots. Halfway up, the wind shifted, and I smelled it again. Rot and cold iron, as if the snow itself were rusting. At the top, the cabin was still intact. Frost coated the windows from the inside, glass webbed with cracks. I shoved the door open and collapsed against the wall, lungs burning. The inside looked untouched since the 80s. Old radio, a desk of warped plywood, a cot covered in ice crystals. I tore open the emergency locker. 2 flares, a rust-stained revolver with 3 rounds, and a half-empty fuel can for the generator. The moment I pulled the cord, the engine coughed to life, flooding the room with a thin orange glow. The light reached the window, and something outside moved. I froze. Through the frost-blurred glass, I saw the shape circling the base of the tower. Massive shoulders, long arms dragging through the snow. It walked the perimeter, silent except for that rhythmic breath. Every few seconds it stopped and looked up, head tilting, eyes black and glistening like oil. I flicked the safety off the revolver and backed toward the far window. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. A sudden thud rattled the floor, then another. The tower shuddered. Bolts screamed in their sockets. The thing was climbing. I grabbed a flare, yanked the cap, and struck it. Red light bloomed through the cabin, filling the glass with bloody glow. The creature's head appeared over the railing, closer than I could stand to believe. Up close, it was worse than any description. The fur clumped in frozen ridges. Its skin had split along the arms, revealing gray muscle and veins that pulsed faintly blue. Ice dripped from its jaw each time it exhaled. Its mouth opened, revealing layers of teeth packed like broken glacier shards. It didn't roar. It breathed out, a deep, wet sigh that fogged the entire window. I fired once. The bullet punched into its chest. It reeled back, not from pain but from surprise, like it hadn't felt something pierce it in a long time. Thick black steam poured from the wound, freezing mid-air into flakes that drifted upward. Then it slammed a hand against the cabin wall, claws carving through plywood as if it were paper. The tower lurched sideways. I dropped the revolver, caught the flare before it rolled, and stumbled toward the generator. The second round of impact nearly threw me through the door. Metal screamed. One of the support beams gave way with a splintering crack. I could see the flare's reflection in the creature's eyes as it peered through the doorway. For a heartbeat, we were both still, the red light flickering, snow swirling between us. I kicked over the fuel can. Gas spread across the floorboards, shimmering in the firelight. "You breathe," I whispered, voice breaking. "Let's see you choke." I hurled the flare. The tower erupted. Fire raced across the floor, up the walls, out through the shattered doorway. The blast hurled me backward through the far window into open air. For a heartbeat, I was weightless, falling through a shower of embers and snow. Then the world hit me, hard, cold, black. When I opened my eyes, I was half buried in drift at the base of the tower. The structure above burned like a beacon in the white night, flames devouring the cabin, while the metal frame twisted and screamed. Through the smoke, I saw it. The Abomazoo stood inside the inferno, unmoving. Fire clung to its fur, running along its limbs in molten streaks. It didn't panic. It just looked down at me through the heat shimmer, expressionless. eyes reflecting nothing but red. Then it stepped backward into the flame. The wood collapsed, swallowing it in a cascade of sparks. The roar of burning timber drowned out everything. I crawled away, dragging my leg, watching the tower fall. The moment it hit the ground, the ridge let out one last sound, a long, distant exhale that rolled through the trees until it faded into silence. The wind didn't return for a long time. I lay there until the fire died to embers, the cold creeping in like water. Above me, the sky turned pale with dawn, and for the first time since I'd entered Frost Pine Ridge, the air stopped breathing. They found me 3 days later. A rescue team out of Iron County tracked the smoke column once the storm cleared. They said they nearly turned back twice. Visibility 0, compass spinning like it had forgotten which way north was. When they reached the ridge, they found a burned-out crater where the tower had stood. The metal frame twisted into a spiral, like something had crushed it inward. They found me half a mile down the slope, curled in a drift beside the wreckage of a snowmobile. Frostbite on 3 fingers, hypothermia so deep my pulse barely registered. The medic said another hour, and I'd have been part of the ridge myself. I don't remember the helicopter ride. I remember the sound of it though, the thump of the rotors against the wind, like a heartbeat echoing through snow. When I came to, I was in Iron County General, hooked to a heating blanket and IV fluids. They told me there was nothing left to recover up there. No sign of a body, no prints, not even metal from the generator or remains of the tower's top half. Just scorched ice and silence. A week later, a package arrived from the Department of Natural Resources, my recovered camera. They'd pulled it from the creek near the sawmill, mostly intact. I shouldn't have looked. The final photo on the memory card wasn't one I remembered taking. It showed the Ranger Tower engulfed in flame, and standing at its base, blurred by heat distortion, was a tall figure watching it burn. When the investigators interviewed me, I told them what I could. That Mercer had been there, that something enormous moved through the ridge, that the air itself seemed alive. They exchanged looks, wrote notes, thanked me for my service, and ended the session early. 2 weeks later, the state map was updated. Section 17 of Frost Pine Ridge was quietly renamed No Access Zone 17. Locals don't hunt there anymore. They say when the wind drops low enough, the ridge hums again, like breath caught in its throat. Sometimes when I'm alone and the room is quiet, I swear I can still hear it. Not a roar, not a scream, just the slow inhale of something waiting beneath the ice, patient as winter itself. They told me the ridge doesn't breathe, but when the wind blows from the north, I still hear it exhale. Another cold trail gone wrong. If you ever find yourself deep in the pines and the wind stops moving, don't wait to hear the next breath. You just heard Abomazoo, the hum beneath Frost Pine Ridge. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, comment, and share it with someone who loves a good scare. Subscribe and join us next time for another night of fear, folklore, and survival. Right here on Cryptid Encounter Stories. Stay safe out there, and remember, the woods don't forget.
And that's tonight's encounter. If you made it this far, you're officially part of the hunt. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss the next story. Until then, keep your eyes open and your flashlight charged.